Welcome to another deep dive. And today, we're going to be talking about the book The Fight for Courage.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
It's by Robert H. and Jacob Powell.
The Powells.
And it tells the story of a fictional character, David Anderson, and how his life is shaped by war, both his father's in Vietnam and his own service later on.
Yeah, and, while the story's fictionalized, it aims to give you a glimpse into the very real struggles that I think many veterans and their families go through.
Yeah,
It makes you think about how war's impact could be felt for generations.
it really does. The story starts with David as a 4-year-old living a pretty idyllic life in Kansas. Loving parents, a dog named Tony, a baby sister on the way. It's all apple pie and sunshine until his dad, Jason, gets his draft notice for Vietnam.
Yeah, that's where the Powells really nail the shift in tone, I think. Suddenly there's this looming sense of dread hanging over the family.
Right.
Jason tries to explain it to little David as God's mission, but how do you even begin to explain that to a 4-year-old?
Yeah, I can imagine it goes right over his head. Right. And they keep telling him his dad will be back soon, but that doesn't erase the underlying fear.
No.
And then comes the actual departure. I was curious what you thought about how the authors handled that scene.
I thought they did a fantastic job of conveying the raw emotion without being overly sentimental. You see David clinging to his father's leg, begging him not to go, and Jason trying to be strong, promising to come home soon. It's heartbreaking, especially knowing what's to come.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, was it even harder for Jason knowing he might not be coming back? Did he believe what he was telling David, or was it just something he had to say?
That's a great question, and I think the novel intentionally leaves it open to interpretation.
Yeah.
We see Jason wrestling with his faith, trying to find meaning in this war, but there's also doubt, a sense of resignation.
So a year passes, and Jason does return home, but it's not the happy reunion everyone was hoping for.
Right. David, now 5, notices a change in his father. There's a distance, a sadness in his eyes. He talks about missing his family, about fulfilling God's mission, but it feels different. Even David, at such a young age, can sense that something is off.
And that's when things take a truly tragic turn.
Yeah, a Jeep pulls into the driveway, a soldier steps out, and the news hits David's family like a ton of bricks. Jason was killed in action. He died saving his comrades, a hero. But for young David, all of that is meaningless. He can't process the grief, the sudden absence of his father. He even rejects the letter Jason had written him, unable to face it.
It's such a powerful image, this little boy running to the pond where he used to fish with his dad, screaming, "Why did you leave us?" into the empty air. I don't know about you, but that line just stayed with me.
It really gets to the heart of the book's themes, I think. Loss, abandonment, the struggle to reconcile faith with tragedy. David's world has been shattered, and he's left with more questions than answers.
And the funeral doesn't provide much comfort, does it? The pastor talks about Jason's sacrifice, comparing it to Christ's sacrifice for humanity. But for David, it's just empty words.
Yeah, you'll see how David struggles with that age-old question. If God is good, why does he allow suffering? The novel doesn't offer easy answers, but it does show us David's journey to reconcile his faith with the harsh realities he faces.
So we fast forward through David's childhood, and as he enters high school, we see him trying to find his place, his purpose.
He throws himself into football, seeking the kind of recognition his dad got for being a soldier, but it never quite fills the void. There's this lingering sense of wanting to understand his father, to somehow connect with him, and eventually that leads him to a life-changing decision.
He decides to follow in his father's footsteps and enlist in the Marines.
Exactly. It's a decision driven by a mix of wanting to honor his father and maybe, just maybe, find answers to the questions that have haunted him since childhood.
But his sister, Susan, isn't so sure about it. She remembers their father as a kind, gentle soul, and she worries about David romanticizing war, repeating the cycle of pain.
Yeah, she represents a very valid concern. The danger of idealizing a parent's sacrifice, of trying to live up to an image that may not fully capture the complexities of who they were. But David is determined. He feels this is his calling, his destiny. And so at 18, he finds himself at Camp Pendleton, facing the grueling world of boot camp.
And that's where we'll leave David for now. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve into the intense training, the bonds of brotherhood, and the looming shadow of war that hangs over everything. Welcome back to our deep dive into the fight for courage. We left David at the gates of Camp Pendleton, about to embark on this journey of becoming a Marine, just like his father. What do you think is going through his mind at this point?
I imagine it's a whirlwind of emotions. Excitement, fear, determination. He's stepping into a world his father knew intimately, a world that ultimately claimed his life. There's a sense of both honoring his legacy and maybe subconsciously trying to rewrite the past.
Right, like if I can succeed where he didn't, maybe we'll somehow make his death less meaningless.
But boot camp is no cakewalk, and the Powells don't shy away from showing the brutal reality of it.
No, they don't. The reader is thrown right into this intense training regimen. The drills, the physical exhaustion, the constant pressure to perform, it's designed to break them down, strip away their individuality, and forge them into a unit.
And in the midst of all that hardship, we see David forming a strong bond with his fellow recruits, especially his best friend Louis.
It's fascinating how the authors depict this camaraderie. You know, they're all going through hell together, and that shared experience creates a powerful connection. They joke around, they support each other, they become more than just friends, they become brothers.
And there's one scene that really stands out to me, the parachute jump over the Pacific.
Oh, yeah.
It's terrifying, of course.
Yeah.
But it's also where David proves his mettle,
Yeah.
saving another recruit, Joshua Williams, from a potentially fatal accident. It's almost like foreshadowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It shows David's courage, his quick thinking under pressure. And it also sets up this interconnectedness between him and Joshua that will play out later in the story. The authors are subtly weaving together these threads of fate and consequence.
So after boot camp, David is stationed at Fort Belvoir in Virginia, and his life takes an unexpected turn. He meets Maddie Watson, a cybersecurity intern.
Yeah, their first encounter is actually quite charming.
Yeah.
David is delivering some papers and bumps into Maddie, literally. Papers go flying, they both apologize profusely, and there's this instant spark.
It's not love at first sight, but it's definitely a connection. And what I found interesting is how their shared experiences of loss drew them closer.
Yeah.
Maddie's father passed away when she was younger, and they find solace in talking about their fathers sharing their grief.
It's almost like they understand each other on a deeper level because of those shared wounds. And as their relationship blossoms, so does David's faith. We see him accompanying Maddie to her Christmas Eve church service, and it seems to resonate with him in a way he hadn't anticipated.
Yeah, he's drawn to the sense of community, the message of hope and forgiveness. It's a stark contrast to the harsh, often cynical world of the Marines. It makes you wonder, is he searching for something to believe in? Something to counterbalance the darkness he's seen?
I think that's a very insightful observation. He's grappling with big questions about life, death, purpose.
Yeah.
And maybe in Maddie, in her faith, he sees a glimmer of something that can help him make sense of it all.
Then that glimmer turns into something much brighter when he proposes to Maddie and she says yes. They start building a life together. They're expecting a child. It seems like everything is finally falling into place. But then the world changes. September 11, 2001.
Yeah, the authors do a brilliant job of capturing the collective shock and horror of that day. David and Louis, now seasoned Marines, are out on a casual outing when the news breaks. The world as they knew it ceases to exist, replaced by fear, uncertainty, and a burning desire for retribution.
And for David, it's not just a national tragedy, it's deeply personal. His father died fighting a war that at the time felt distant, abstract. Now war has come to American soil, and he feels compelled to act to protect his family, his country.
It's a powerful moment of decision. He's torn between his duty to his country and his duty to his family. Maddie is pregnant with their second child, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But for David, there's no question. He re-enlists, joining a Special Forces team under Captain Jackson for Operation Enduring Freedom.
It's almost like history is repeating itself, isn't it? His father going off to Vietnam, now David going off to Afghanistan. Both driven by a sense of duty, a need to fight for something bigger than themselves.
And as David bids farewell to Maddie, to their son Samuel, to his unborn child, there's this palpable sense of dread, of echoes from the past. Will he be able to escape the fate that befell his father? Or will he too become another casualty of war?
Welcome back to our deep dive into the fight for courage. We left David heading into the heart of Afghanistan, following in his father's footsteps, but hoping for a different outcome. And as he prepares to face the realities of war, he carries with him this letter his father wrote all those years ago, a letter that's been unopened, almost untouched since his childhood.
Yeah, it's incredible how that letter becomes such a potent symbol in this part of the book. Think about it. It represents David's unresolved grief, his lingering questions about his father, and maybe even a fear of what those words might reveal.
It's almost like he's been holding on to it as a shield, protecting himself from the full weight of his father's absence. But now facing his own mortality in a war-torn country, he's finally ready to confront it, to hear what his father had to say.
And what he finds in that letter isn't what he expected. It's not filled with tales of heroism or bravado. Instead, Jason's words are deeply personal, full of love for his family, and a quiet faith that resonates even across the decades.
So he finally opens this letter from his father, written from the jungles of Vietnam, and what does he find? What words have been waiting for him all these years?
Jason talks about the simple things he misses: family dinners, watching David play baseball, teaching him to fish in that same pond where David cried out after his death. There's regret for missing those milestones,
Yeah.
but also a deep conviction that his sacrifice is for a greater purpose.
He references the Bible verse Joshua 1.9, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go."
It's almost prophetic, isn't it? As if Jason knew even back then that his son would one day need those words of encouragement.
Yeah, and he goes on to make this fascinating comparison between his situation and the story of Job from the Bible. Just as Job lost everything and was later rewarded tenfold, Jason believes that he too will be rewarded for the time stolen from his family. It's a testament to his unwavering faith, even in the face of immense suffering.
It makes you think about how people find meaning in difficult situations. For Jason, it was faith. Do you think David finds the same solace in his father's words? It's not an immediate transformation, but the letter does plant a seed. Remember, David has been struggling with his faith throughout the book. His father's death, his own experiences in war, it's all shaken his belief in a loving God. But reading those words, seeing his father's unwavering conviction, it opens a door for him.
And this newfound understanding comes at a crucial time. David is back home, physically safe, but deeply scarred by what he's seen and done in Afghanistan. He's trying to be a good husband, a good father, but he's haunted by nightmares, flashbacks, that constant sense of being on edge.
The authors do a remarkable job of depicting the invisible wounds of war. David isn't physically maimed, but he's carrying a heavy burden of guilt trauma and the emotional toll of combat. He pushes Maddie away, struggles to connect with his children, and his behavior becomes increasingly erratic.
And this all culminates in that tense scene at the sporting goods store, right? He sees a woman carelessly handling a gun, and it triggers a flashback to the battlefield, the chaos, the fear. He overreacts, grabs the gun from her, and ends up getting arrested.
It's a breaking point for him. He's facing serious charges, the possibility of prison, and it forces him to confront the fact that he needs help. He can't keep bottling everything up, pretending he's okay.
That's when he finally breaks down and confesses his struggles to Maddie. He admits that he's not the same man who left for Afghanistan, that he needs help to find his way back.
It's a crucial moment of vulnerability and honesty. And to Maddie's credit, she doesn't judge him. She supports him, encourages him to seek professional help, and reminds him that he's not alone in this.
And as David embarks on his journey of healing, the courtroom scene becomes another turning point. He could try to downplay his actions, blame his PTSD, but instead he takes full responsibility.
Yeah, his honesty and remorse resonate with the jury. They find him not guilty, but mandate counseling, acknowledging that while his actions were wrong, they were a consequence of his service, of the sacrifices he's made for his country.
It's a powerful message, a recognition that sometimes justice requires compassion and understanding. And from there, we see David, slowly but surely, starting to heal. He attends therapy, reconnects with his family, and finds solace in his faith, a faith that was rekindled by his father's letter.
The book ends on a hopeful note. David is at the park with his family, watching his children play, and there's a sense of peace, of hard-won contentment. He's still carrying the scars of war, but they no longer define him. He's found a way to live with them, to find meaning and joy in the present moment.
The Fight for Courage is ultimately a story about resilience, about finding strength in unexpected places, about the power of love and forgiveness to heal even the deepest wounds. It leaves us with a lot to think about: how we can support our veterans, how we can recognize the unseen struggles of those around us, and how we can all find the courage to face our own battles, whatever form they may take.
It's a story that stays with you long after you finish the last page, and hopefully it inspires us all to be a little more understanding, a little more compassionate, and a little more courageous in our own lives.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into The Fight for Courage. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the stories that matter.